Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're uncovering the strict mathematical rules of our natural world and seeing just how deeply interconnected our actions really are. You know, we hear the word environment thrown around a lot, on the news, at global summits, but right now, we're going to break down exactly how its invisible gears actually turn. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with ecosystems, finding the balance, then move to food chains and energy flow. After that, we'll cover the biological magnification problem, depleting the ozone layer, and finally, managing our daily garbage. Section 1. Ecosystems, finding the balance. To really wrap our heads around the macro world, we've got to start small. Think of an aquarium. It's essentially a self-sustaining micro world, right? But for it to actually work, the fish, the plants, the water, and the oxygen have to be in perfect harmony. You can't just throw some fish in a jar and call it a day. They need space, they need oxygen, they need food. And that interaction, that interplay between living things and their physical surroundings, that is the perfect, straightforward definition of an ecosystem.
Now, every single ecosystem out there, whether it's a tiny fish tank in your living room or a massive sprawling forest, requires a really delicate balance between two main components. On one side, we've got the biotic components. These are the living things, the producers, the consumers, the decomposers. And on the flip side, we have the abiotic components. These are physical factors like temperature, soil, wind, and rainfall. And here's the kicker. The growth, reproduction, and sheer survival of all those living things, they are entirely dictated by those non-living factors.
Moving right along to Section 2, food chains and energy flow.
Let's see how this balance actually translates into energy moving through an ecosystem. Unknowingly, every single time an organism eats, it's participating in a very strict sequence called a food chain. It kicks off with producers, like green plants pulling in solar energy. They pass that chemical energy along to the primary consumers, mostly herbivores. Then the secondary consumers step in, followed by the tertiary consumers, the larger carnivores. It's this incredibly structured, step-by-step handover of natural fuel. But wow, here's a truly staggering number for you. When a green plant captures energy from the sun, it only holds on to about 1% of it. But as that energy moves up the food chain, say from a plant to a deer, and then from that deer to a tiger, only an average of 10% of the food eaten is actually turned into body mass and made available for the next consumer level. Just 10%.
So you're probably asking, where on earth does the rest of it go? Well, that massive 90% is basically lost. A huge chunk of it radiates out as heat into the environment. Some is burned up during the literal process of digestion, and the rest is used up just doing the hard physical work of living, growing, and reproducing. And because of this massive progressive energy drop-off, nature strictly limits food chains. You will almost never see a chain longer than 3 or 4 steps, simply because there just isn't enough usable energy left in the tank after that 4th level.
All right, Section 3. The biological magnification problem.
What exactly happens when artificial, human-made chemicals infiltrate this beautifully mathematical system? We spray pesticides to protect our crops from bugs and disease, which, seems like a fairly localized solution at first glance. But these chemicals don't just magically stay on the crops. They wash down into the soil, seep into our water bodies, and kick off a terrifying, totally unseen chain reaction.
This brings us to a crucial phenomenon known as biological magnification. And here is where things get really profound and pretty dangerous. Unlike natural energy, which drops off at each step, these non-degradable chemicals do the exact opposite. They get absorbed by aquatic plants, eaten by fish, and progressively increase and accumulate at each and every trophic level. And because humans sit right at the very top of the food chain, the absolute maximum concentration of these toxins gets deposited directly into our bodies. Honestly, this is why just washing your vegetables or rice doesn't fully remove the pesticide residue. The chemicals are literally built into the fabric of the food chain itself.
Section 4. Depleting the ozone layer.
Now let's zoom out from the food web entirely and look at the macro level of our atmosphere, where another invisible layer of protection is being seriously altered. Down here at ground level, ozone is actually a deadly poison, but way up high in the atmosphere, it performs an absolutely crucial function. It acts like a global force field, shielding the surface of the Earth from the sun's intense ultraviolet, or UV, radiation. And we all know that radiation is highly damaging and is a major cause of skin cancer in humans.
The atmospheric chemistry here is actually wonderfully simple.
High-energy UV radiation from the sun literally splits apart standard oxygen molecules, O2, into free-floating oxygen atoms. These free, incredibly reactive atoms then bump into and combine with other intact O2 molecules to form O3, which is ozone. But as elegant as this natural machinery is, it's also remarkably fragile.
Back in the 1980s, scientists noticed the amount of ozone in our atmosphere was dropping pretty sharply. The culprit? Our everyday conveniences. Synthetic chemicals known as chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs. These were heavily used in things like refrigerators and fire extinguishers. Once released, they basically acted like a giant wrench thrown straight into the delicate gears of ozone creation, literally tearing apart our protective shield. But wait, here is where we actually see the awesome power of collective human action. Fortunately, the United Nations Environment Program managed to forge a massive global agreement in 1987 to freeze CFC production entirely. It proved that we actually can course correct. And today, it is strictly mandatory for all manufacturing companies across the globe to make CFC-free refrigerators, a huge win for the planet.
And finally, Section 5, Managing Our Daily Garbage.
Let's bring this all back down to earth, quite literally, to the waste we generate in our everyday lives. We've all seen heaps of garbage littering our cities. But why exactly does some waste just vanish, while other waste seems to stay there forever? Well, it all comes down to enzymes. Inside our bodies, enzymes are super specific. They easily digest our food, but you wouldn't get a single drop of energy if you tried to eat a lump of coal, right? Nature works the exact same way. Bacteria and saprophytes possess the specific biological tools to break down natural biodegradable materials, but they totally lack the enzymes needed to digest human-made plastics. So these non-biodegradable materials can only be broken down by extreme physical heat or pressure, which means they just persist in our environment for a very, very long time.
This brilliantly highlights just how complex environmental solutions can be. Let's look at the humble disposable train cup. Back in the day, train passengers drank tea from plastic glasses that were just washed and reused. Then, to improve hygiene, millions of single-use plastic cups were introduced daily. Naturally, that created a massive environmental headache. So as an eco-friendly fix, they suggested culottes, which are disposable clay cups. Great idea, right? Well, a little bit of digging revealed a hidden cost. Making millions of clay cups would require mining an unbelievable amount of fertile topsoil, devastating local agriculture. Fast forward to today, and we've landed on disposable paper cups. It just goes to show every single solution requires us to carefully map out the secondary consequences.
As our standard of living has gone up, the sheer volume of waste we generate has skyrocketed. The shift in how we package goods has drastically skewed our output toward non-biodegradable trash. Ultimately, this isn't just a science problem anymore, it's an attitude problem. We've totally embraced this disposable culture, and our ecosystem is out there bearing the immense, heavy weight of all that convenience.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I really want you to stop and ask yourself a question. Can our ecosystem survive without damage if we alter or remove just one element? Honestly, it's impossible to isolate our actions. If we wipe out the predators, the herbivores overpopulate and starve. If we invent an indestructible plastic, it outlasts generations. If we spray a heavy chemical, it climbs right up the food chain straight onto our dinner plates. In a system where absolutely everything is mathematically fundamentally connected, what ripple effects are your daily choices creating?